Hi, in this video I'm going to demonstrate something that I recently had an argument with another DB about. I was called in to do auditing for a company, I can't mention their name, and what happened was that I was going through their security principles and I found out that what the DBA or someone had done was create a login and obviously one of the mistakes they made was using a fairly easy to guess password, but the other thing was that they had created the account or they had created the principal, but they hadn't given it any permissions as such. So it was still lying in public role. And I'd gone ahead and mentioned that, if you're not using it, you should get rid of it. You can't just leave it lying around. And the argument was that it's an account, it doesn't have any permissions, it's just public, there's nothing anybody can do with it. And he explained to me that they're not able to access any database, etc. So it became a kind of a discussion where they were kind of trying to convince me that the account in itself is harmless. Whereas I was trying to explain to them that no, someone who knows what they're doing can still harm the system. And it got me thinking about how many people might be actually aware of this particular flaw in the system. And so I thought I'd demonstrate what that is today. So typically when you look at your accounts inside SQL Server, you create a login and then you grant it permissions. And depending on what permissions you grant the account, they're allowed to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. So let's go ahead and create a login for now, and I'll kind of demonstrate both sides of the scenario so that you get a picture about what I'm trying to explain. Now, in this particular case, I'm just going to go ahead and say test user as an account. And one of the mistakes they made was they used a similar password, and that made it very easy for me to just randomly guess what it could be. And as you can see here, I've created test user, I've created the password. I've just not done anything in the server role, so it's still lying in public here. And even on the user mappings, you'll see that I've not really given it any permissions at the database level to any of the databases, and therefore securables, everything else remains in the defaults. And I press OK. So at this point, let me just go ahead and close that off, and I'm going to start logging in as this user that I've just created. So I'm going to say test user, and naturally you can guess that I'm typing test user again. And I press connect, and as you can see, I'm allowed to connect to the database. I can see a list of the databases, I can see security, I can see credentials, etc, etc. And the argument was that if I try to open a database, naturally I get this error, and therefore if I say create database demo, well, okay, in this case I'm still logged in as that user, so let me just go ahead and close this off, and I'm going to start a new query window, and I'll say create database demo 2. Just hold on a second. And the argument was that what difference does it make if a user exists but they don't have any permissions? They can't really do anything to the system, and therefore it's harmless. And while I understand the argument was basically just so that I'd sign off on it rather than them having to sit and explain to the clients why the audit failed, but the point that I was trying to make to them was, if I can guess the password, I can still connect to the system very much the way that I'm doing right now. And once I do that, I could simply do something like select one as ID into hash temp, because a public role still doesn't prevent me from creating a temporary table. And if I can do this, then naturally the next thing I might want to do is insert into hash temp and select star from hash temp. And let's say I just go ahead and run this 1,000 times, and I just execute this. You can probably see where I'm going with this, because at this point what's happening is that, as you can see, I am inserting data into the temp table, and my temp DB size is growing significantly, and as it grows, at some point it's going to consume the entire disk space on the underlying hardware, and also typically it crashes the temp DB. And since we only have one of those, when temp DB crashes, pretty much everything else associated with SQL Server is bound to crash as well. And as you can see, I don't really need permissions, I just need a username and a password that I can guess. And even though you don't grant me any special permissions, I can still do significant amount of damage. And essentially this is a sort of a denial of service attack if you think about it, because all I'm really doing is putting so much stress on the machine that it really can't service any genuine requests, and all of this without being granted any permissions to begin with. So if you're doing this and if you have accounts that are not secured with tough passwords to begin with, and more importantly very clearly defined permissions, then this is something you need to worry about, because you're probably just relying on luck, and at some point your luck's gonna run out and someone's gonna find this loophole in your system and take advantage of it. uh, since I have you here on this, there's also one more thing that I want to highlight over here, and that is stop granting excessive permissions to your service accounts. There's tons of material out there explaining why it's a bad idea, but even now, every time I go for an audit, I see plenty of cases where the service accounts that run SQL Server and even integration services and the other agent accounts as well all have far too many permissions than they actually need, and naturally it's just a matter of time before someone finds that out. So that's pretty much it. It's a fairly quick video, and I hope this makes it clear why you shouldn't be doing things like this, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.